to open this discussion, I might be saying that the environmental awareness is increasing, and the concerns in urbanization and technological development have resulted in an urgent need and opportunity to rethink how we construct and manage our cities. This started to promote utilizing smart technology. And in that context, I would like to start with the first question, which basically addresses how design firms can benefit from using data to find patterns, trends, and relationships in anticipating end-user requirements. Feel free, I mean, I'm not going to just, pop the question directly to anyone, but Doctor, you might want to start.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to contribute. I think the smart technologies, what are going to give us is actually to allow us to close the design, build, and operate cycle, actually. So design firms will actually benefit from the data gathered during the operational phase to improve the future and to become more efficient and more to design more sustainable buildings into the future, actually. So that is where I see the role of the smart technologies on closing and providing good data so that we can analyze and we can identify that if the building is going to be occupied or unoccupied, as the previous speaker was saying, it will help to pre-cool or to kind of prepare the building so that it is actually more energy efficient based on the occupancy data. And the design firms will be able to size the equipment accordingly based on all these operational elements. So that is my view on that.
Mr. Andreas, can you add some more there?
In Smart for Power, we provide energy saving solutions. So we have quite a lot of data with many energy audits that we did. And we can always identify significant improvements in the existing buildings, which at the end will also provide information for the design of the new buildings, what could be improved in the design there in order to be more energy efficient. In average, we've done about 150 energy audits by now, and in average we can reduce the consumption by between 20 and 30%.
Okay.
That's quite a significant difference.
But are these energy audits are event-based, or I mean, what's the basis of these audits?
They are audits in individual facilities, and we have what we call a walkthrough audit, so a very brief audit of a building, which is just really a physical walk through the building, and it gives us a brief idea of what is the consumption levels. And then we also have the detailed audit, where we bring all our equipment and we really measure over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, and we have a detailed consumption profile of the building.
Okay. Michael, I think you want to add?
Well, a trend we are seeing over there is not only take into account like all the technicalities and the optimization of the technical installation, but also, using, actually the behavior of the people, the occupants in the building. And when you are building for a certain client, you have, the culture of the organization, and the usage of the building is mostly company specific. So what we consider doing is doing measuring campaigns in advance before new construction to see that we can not only optimize technical installation and the energy usage, but also space usage. Because if you can reduce the program, then actually, every square meter that you don't use, it's a square meter that you gain on an energy efficiency point of view, and also from a rent and all that.
Yeah, but when we're talking about trends and modeling and understanding the behavior of buildings, are we looking at the events that are occurring in the buildings and the circumstances that had led to these events? Are we linking those together?
Absolutely. Yeah. Looking for correlations. What triggers what reaction from the building occupants? At least we do. I don't know.
I mean, a good example for that is a building where we analyzed that 62% of the consumption is happening in non-working hours. So to achieve improvements there is relatively easy by rescheduling and adjusting the set points. And so there's significant savings that can be made there. Or in another example, in a school, we have a significant base load, which is 300 kilowatt hours, because the chiller is always on, because there's an IT room that has to be cooled. Now, there's different solutions that can be applied, and in the evening or in the night or on the weekend, the chiller can be switched off, actually.
Excellent. I have a question for Mr. Manouche, actually, and my question is, how does building information modeling tools and sustainability approaches help in reducing the operational costs?
Well,
this is what I wanted to touch with you on.
Yeah. So I think it depends on the scale at which you're working. The scale at which our firm, CH2M, usually works or typically works is large master plans. So you could almost argue that the level of saving that you achieve at the building level, as you proportionately go up to a city level, begins to get skewed heavily, because based on phasing, occupancy of zones, etc., the level of efficiency that you plan for or you target may not be achieved. And what we find working across the region is that the feedback loops between suppliers and authorities with respect to the owners of the data and the platforms that they have, and the amount of sharing that they provide the consultant, certainly at the time of bidding, is quite weak. So even if a company has the intent to provide a more sustainable approach in utilizing systems that they may have, proprietary systems that may have, those systems are challenged because of unavailability of data at the time of which you are conceiving how the project might be developed for the client.
That actually brings me back to the first panel of discussion that you had, and where we were talking about the data and the sharing of the data. And that was a main concern to me, and I've shared that with you. Okay? I might direct the question now to Mr. Melvin, and ask the same question, where if we are trying to share data and we're trying to learn from the processes that we have, the control of data that is currently being exercised, how is this holding us back? I mean, is it holding us back? Do we have enough information today?
Can I just start? Good morning, everybody. Can I start by saying I feel a bit of a fake news sitting here, as Trump says, because I think at my age, this kind of smart technology goes slightly over my head sometimes. My 6-year-old daughter is better with it than I am at home, I know that. So looking at it from my perspective, I've been in my industry for about 40 years now. I've spent about 20 years in the Middle East. I first came here in 1982 to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I've watched all these places around the region go from small towns to cities, big cities. And I've watched the pace of construction. I've watched Dubai rise from the desert and become what it's become. And I see in construction itself nowadays, technology is being used. Mostly the data side of it is more to do with the design side, the BIM systems, which help now to organize things much better, to show things much better, and to avoid risks and problems that we had in the past by using data and this technology. But my one bugbear is that since 1982, which is now, 35 years ago, we still build things the way we did back in the 70s. So the construction industry is still a dinosaur compared to the rest of the world and compared to other technologies. So when I keep hearing what people are talking about today, it's very enlightening. It's very nice that we're all aiming for these end products and all this data sharing and smart systems and smart cities and everything else. But I do question why we still deliver it in the systems that come from the 1960s and 1970s. What I mean by that is, if I go to London and stay in a hotel and there's a construction site next door and I look over to that site, I see very few people, but I see technology and machines being used to drop things in place and to build them. Well, you only have to go on a site here, and we have many sites, multiple sites all over this region, which I visit, and I see 100 men with spades digging a trench, which takes them 1 day, which a machine could probably do in 1 hour. So whilst we're aiming for this smart cities and smart technology and everything else as an end product, in this region especially, we still seem to be stuck in the past, and we deliver things.
Is it stuck in the past, or it's a balance between technology and human resource?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's stuck in the past, because I think the mentality of the people around that the decision makers have been around here too long.
Okay.
I'm probably one of them, and they still think the old-fashioned ways of traditional methods of building things.
So if I ask you the second question, which is passive and active design studies in terms of and their design impact, and how these studies are actually influencing the design and construction, you're not...
No, what I'm saying is the design side is picked up on technology. So we have these systems like BIM and things which help us greatly, and they've made it very different to today where we all sat there and drew things by hand on a board. We do it all by CAD systems and very simply now. But still, we go on site and we're building things like we did 50 years ago or 40 years ago, which to me is a complete nonsense, because the reason being really at the end of the day is clients still have the mentality that it's going to cost them more to use machines and technology to build their things. And so they rely on thousands of labor on site doing things manually instead of using technology to do things a lot quicker and, more importantly, to deliver things better quality.
I think Michael wants to add to this.
Well, I do see some trends in the real construction, like brick and mortar business, where we see some 3D printing also of complete buildings going on, even in Dubai, where they try to print, or they do print actually complete usable, functional rooms and buildings. But of course, yeah, if you go for high sky-rise buildings, yeah, you don't take, well, first of all, there is not the technology to print it, I think. And again, you want proven technology. And maybe also for the region, from an economical point of view, that's not so bad. Because imagine that all the labor in construction sites would be cut down for the whole area. Well, then maybe there would be some kind of social and economic problem for Dubai. I don't know. For Dubai, for the UAE, actually.
Thanks, Michael. Doctor?
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit, like maybe shifting it from a different, not just the construction, but maybe the energy management perspective. For example, sometimes the smart, or what I would like to understand by smart, like the latest cutting technology, sometimes it seems that we have skipped or leapfrog one step. We are missing a little bit of something a little bit simpler, which is like the energy monitoring equipment, for example. That it looks like in order to save energy, we have to wait for the DWA bill for a month until we actually find our savings, and that is not the case. If we had the smart technologies, I mean, we could see in real time almost what is actually the effect of the energy saving measures that we put in place, and that gives us data, and it is not only the hardware, which I think is to gather the energy data is the important bit, but also to gather that good data and to have the capacity of analyzing it properly. And I think that is where the smart is going to, or where I see that is actually, we might not want to leapfrog one technology and kind of go to the cutting edge and just keep it a little bit more simple, because maybe in this region, that is definitely what I see lacking at the moment.
Excellent, excellent.
Oh, and then the benchmarking, of course.
Of course, yes.
Where you just compare, being open about your data and not in detail when you get privacy issues and commercial benefits out of that, but just general comparison data would be nice, actually, for the region. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Andreas, I want to shift the discussion now to smart technology. Where does it stand today in terms of capital cost versus operational and upkeep costs?
Well, if I go back to the audits that we did, usually, as I said, we could achieve between 20 and 30% of savings. And the investment that we need to upgrade the systems had a payback between 2 and 3 years.
Okay.
So if you look at that, then in terms of capital cost, it's very, very attractive. And that means in 2 years is a 50% return on investment. That doesn't happen very often. So capital cost is not really an issue, I would say. It really definitely makes sense to invest in energy efficient solutions, to invest in energy monitoring, and the money will come back. In terms of maintenance and upkeep, it depends on the solution, really. That's different.
I think
on a similar line, I mean, with construction, traditionally, there's so much waste on a site, the way things are done. And you can save 30% costs of premium costs of the whole development if you had technology involved, whereby you were recycling, do whatever you do with the waste, and you were using technology to build things which would cut down the waste drastically. So it's not only also the cost that you're saving, life cycle costs and everything else. As I said, during construction itself, if it was done a lot more advanced, you can save fortunes and it will pay for that technology to do it. Of course, there'd be social outcries because of it, because you have thousands of subcontinent labour which won't be needed here anymore, and that is an issue for them in their own country, presumably. And there are always going to be those problems, but still, cutting down waste on construction is the same as cutting down the cost, recycling costs and everything later.
Mr. Mahush.
Yes, there's an opportunity here to link the discussion we just had with the one we had previously, which is that the codes and standards in these regions are still reflecting the practices that exist today. So what we often find when we're planning something, although the aspiration on the demand side is to cut by a particular percentage, on the supply side, those planning regulations still don't allow us to achieve those efficiencies. So those challenges begin at that stage itself. And looking forward, if we really want to drive efficiencies and see the reduction in capital costs in terms of how many substations do you need? Do we need this volume of pipe work or road works to be laid into the site? They really need to start with the planning departments of all of these organizations where they look at those manuals and say, you know what, we wrote this at a time or in the context of when these systems were not there. The feedback was not coming in. Now that we have the technology, we can downsize some of these planning requirements, and then when you go down to get a building permit, you are within the constraints that have been imposed on you rather than exceeding those.
Okay. I wished I had a property manager or part of the discussion, because in most projects, I've been a property manager before, okay? Though I'm an engineer, but I've been a property manager before. Most of the promises that we had in implementing smart technologies and their impact on cost savings and your running costs and things like that, almost never succeeded to achieve the values that we were promised. Never succeeded to achieve that edge or that line that actually defines or let's say verifies or gives us that capital cost expenditure that we have put. Okay, so where do you see the problem, Doctor?
In my opinion, I think that again we try to leapfrog and we want to go for the latest of the latest, and then it's like, here's the latest thing, and then because it's the latest you might want to pay a little bit more, and then you've got the promises, it hasn't been tested. I think the most simple solution that you can get here is a timer with a switch.
Yes.
Air conditioning running at night doesn't do any good to anyone. You switch it off, you switch it on at 5 o'clock in the morning to pre-cool the building, and that will save you. We are putting and installing I don't know, putting equipment that is actually going to save us 10%, but just by switching it off, that we don't use any energy, it's actually going to save us much more during the night. So I think one step at a time, it will be much better.
Excellent. Sorry, but he asked for...
Well, I absolutely agree. What I also see nowadays from a property management point of view is that lots of buildings are generating loads and loads of data. Not really big data, but loads and loads of data, and the interpretation of that data isn't done that well, isn't that done that correctly?
Because don't you think because it's always connected to an event on its own, and it's not actually addressing how that event occurred?
Well, absolutely. So it's really, well, what happened and not why did it happen? And we should combine more data sets, more looking for correlations to look why something happened and why something occurred. And it can be as simple as just normalizing the data for degree days or whatever, which is pretty basic to do, but still lacking in lots of operations today.
Yeah, I think another point is, again, going back to what I was saying before, it's the reason why as a developer you didn't get all those promises delivered is because you're mixing smart technology promises with antiquated ways of doing things. So if you mix them two together, you're going to fail every time. Yes. And until the day where, as you say, a building is built by a machine, which can be totally accurate and precise and exactly what you want, rather than humans, which have the problems of interpretation and opinion and everything else, which is what changes the values at the end of the day. So.
Well, just to intervene a little bit, I'm totally on the same page. Commissioning as such isn't done properly. So we are installing the latest technology, doing it on some old-fashioned ways. And actually making commissioning like adjusting the set points, looking for optimizations, just turning the buttons that are already there, isn't always done properly and should become a habit actually for all the new constructions that are being built.
All consultants.
Well, for consultants, of course, that's the way they get around. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. I wanted to add on that as well, because I agree with your point that maybe there is many promises being made, and in reality, it's not always met. I think for this, I mean, our advice is to go with a professional company that works in that field, and then give the responsibility back to them. So, for example, our approach is that we go together through the implementation of the energy conservation measures. When we have done a detailed audit, we are able to give a savings commitment, and we are willing to give that. We operate the building for a period of 1 year or 2 years, and we show that we can achieve the savings. And if not, then we agree that we have to return some of the payment that was not saved.
Okay.
So in this case, it protects the customer for the investment, and it makes sure that the money that has been promised as being saved is actually achieved.
Unfortunately, then you get into the traditional blame game, and who's to blame for it, and therefore that's why you shouldn't take the money.
Exactly what I wanted to say. You always end up with that argument of the blame game.
Well, but if you have data, then the blame game should be clear.
But again, your data is influenced from your inputs.
Well, your data is influenced from your, okay, but well, you should trust the data. It should be trustworthy,
okay.
In fact, and from that you can derive. And for instance, for ESCO companies in Europe, it's very hard to start because one thing you cannot control, it's user behavior, and through the development of IoT and software, you can actually couple facility management and IoT devices and BIM layers and geoinformation systems. Well, you can actually just find correlations, and the blame game you can control for like 80%, if I just pick a number between 50 and 100.
This brings me to my final question to the panel. How educated do you think are we today and the general public of using the smart systems and utilizing smart systems to reduce energy and improve the environment in that regard? How do you think the public is?
Do you want me to start from the dinosaur point of view?
Yes, definitely.
And I'll go last.
Yeah, okay, because I'm probably the oldest one here, if not in the room. I would say 0 to me, because as I said, technology is kind of goes over my head most of the time. And I do worry because I have children, 5 children of different ages going up to 30 years old, and they're going to inherit a world where technologies and things will come in, but at the same time take away probably 80% of the jobs that occur in the world at the moment in the next 50, 100 years. So unemployment and things that come from that are going to be a major issue. So I think there's a whole shift. It's okay saying introducing technology, smart ideas, and how the people perceive it and accept it. There's a lot more to it than that. There's the social problems that are going to occur from it, because as soon as you start getting rid of all these jobs for people, as you said, the labourers or even the people that design or build buildings, they're going to go because machines one day will do these things. So what do the next generation do in the future? I have no idea. I don't even know what to advise my children to study in university anymore, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years. Okay. So perception is one thing, but what will happen in the future, I think, is something we don't really know. That's the problem.
But, that contradicts with what our intention from smart systems are. Okay, we're trying to save the environment. We're trying to cut down on resources use. Maybe, Doctor, you can add to that.
Through one of the projects that I'm working on, I came to know that the average time span that the citizen devotes to the energy bill throughout the year is 7 minutes. So 30 seconds, when it comes the bill, have to pay that, and probably is criticizing the amount that he has to pay, not the energy itself. So that puts the context of the situation. But the second thing is that if the smart technology eventually saves energy, then the licensing effect can happen. And the licensing effect is actually like when you go to the gym and you work out, and then you typically have a snack after. So put it into the energy context is, oh, the smart things are there to save energy for me. Then I can use more energy because it's going to save. And that is a little bit of behavioral perception,
exactly.
which is not really, is not going to do the good
so
or the greater
key driver,
good.
The key driver is behavior and
the smart
ownership
support
of that technology that you're using.
So I think smart shouldn't be seen as a substitute for common sense. You know, I mean, we've only recently been introduced to these sensors and things like that, which allegedly make our lives simpler or allow us to get all this fantastic data. But I mean, go back to the time when these things didn't exist. You were living in areas, your parents were telling you switch off the light when you leave the room, etc. So those behaviors have shifted so wildly from what was norm that now we are again sort of transferring the blame or the ownership of the responsibility to these senses to automate our lifestyle.
Yeah, but we need it today.
Absolutely.
I mean, today you are so busy, okay, you need to have some smart systems that can educate themselves to your trends, to your habits, and try to work with you to minimize, don't you agree? And cut down on your consumption of resources.
Sure, but that shouldn't come at the cost of common sense is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because what's happening right now is, I think if, and I don't know, I think this is probably just more anecdotal than it is based on scientific fact, but if you think about the level of savings that you may be able to achieve through some of those senses, are they really as significant as proper behavioral things such as, you know, shutting things down when you don't need them, sharing a car or a ride when you have to go to a common destination?
So actually, what we're saying is, let's chuck down the smart technology and depend back on behavioral and education.
They should help. Smart technology should help, but they shouldn't substitute completely your behavior.
Exactly.
Well, not yet. They should actually, but we are not already there. Because those are actually simple business rules. If you ask me, what do your children need to go and study, it's data science. Because that's actually the future, of course. It's what can we do with data and how can we optimize and how can we implement common sense into those applications so that it's really common sense, because my common sense is not your common sense and not for the general public. If you ask me, like, how ready is the public? Well, they see all the gadgets and they find it very cool, but what they are actually achieving, especially in energy, that's not always clear. And because it's very specific, it's very on topic. And maybe that shouldn't be clear. You should have all the information available to be aware what you're doing. But, well, it should be common sense, as in it should do it for you. You shouldn't be aware that that process is happening to optimize whatever. And that's also the happiness idea. It's really about, okay, how can we make a better world? How can we optimize our living without actually constantly thinking about what we are doing? Just doing our thing, optimizing from that.
I agree with you.
But I'm born in 83, so yeah.
I think I won't take your advice. I tell my children to go into the arts and culture because I think I tell them to let technology take care of itself and let somebody else have the data and all that kind of stuff. That's it, because there's enough of those people around. In any case, one day, presumably, computers and machines will do that anyway.
True.
But maybe they won't do the artistic and the cultural side. I don't know.
Excellent.
No, probably.
Gentlemen, if you don't have anything more to add, I would like to thank you, and I would like to call for questions, if any, from the audience. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Neil McCulloch from WSP Parsons Brinkhoff. I want to ask the panel about the devices themselves and the life cycle of these devices. We're hearing more and more devices coming in, being used, they're getting smarter, but the smart things are changing every day. You buy a mobile phone today, it's defunct tomorrow. We're getting into a cycle of things being thrown away more and more often. Also, on these smart devices, they're using more and more rare materials. There's more mining going on for these materials, which have to go into devices for the devices to be used. So it's the offset of what you're gaining from the smart technology versus the mining of these materials and the source of the materials, and then also to the end use of them. What happens to these devices when they're defunct in a year's time and the new device comes in which replaces it? Should we be putting more emphasis on to the manufacturer, more a requirement on the manufacturer to actually consider sustainability in the whole smart infrastructure field and say what happens when it, from birth through to death?
Exactly. Andreas, you want to?
Well, I think my first comment would be overall there's a large number of solutions out there in terms of smart systems. And that's maybe also a little bit the challenge for the consumers to identify what is really required and what is the one they should select and make use of it. And I think this is the big challenge in the industry. So if you want to do a home automation system and upgrade your home, I think it's very challenging to find out what is the right solution, which one should be implemented. There's no clear market leader, that's the one I should go with, and there's so many different options. And for a home user, it is not easy to identify the right solution.
Would you like to?
Well, there is the movement of circular economy, where everybody is looking into how can we reuse all those substances and mining things and whatever, and actually that should be an emphasis in research. Because that will become an issue in the end. To my opinion, that will become an issue if it isn't already an issue. We see that the first solar panels, photovoltaic systems are now being decommissioned, are being recycled actually. They are still plain siliciums. So yeah, a lot of research has to be done in that area, and it will become very important, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, sustainability is the core purpose of everything that we're talking about. Doctor, if you would like to.
In my opinion, it's a little bit about that life cycle assessment as well, of how much that device is going to save versus how much energy or rare materials you kind of put at the beginning. And it's always been typically a small fraction. I don't know about the sensors in particular, but yeah, I think it's worth definitely checking.
Okay.
I think obviously the word is recycling anyway. If you're designing phones nowadays and every 2 years you want to buy the latest phone, what do you do with the phone you just got in your hand?
Yes.
Actually don't know what you do with it. There's two ways of going about it. You design something which is then recycled to then incorporate the new technology so simply, therefore you keep the phone that you had in the first place, instead of keep swapping them every 2 years. The other way, of course, is that whilst we sit in this part of the world with relative wealth and access to this kind of technology, of the 7 billion people on this earth, there's probably about more than half of those which haven't got a phone, which haven't got any technology. Why don't we then just contribute and give this technology we have to them to use while we want to replace it with something else, free of charge, because they haven't got the money to use technology, so at least we can help them by giving them the things they need.
True. Any further questions? I hope we answered your question. Okay. Any other question? Yes.
Hi, good morning. This may be venturing into the realms of sci-fi, but I wanted to ask you about the use of AI and auto-responsive building materials, and how you can use those materials to mimic common sense, as Manoj was saying, and sort of creating an infrastructure or building system that is sort of self-aware and responds to the environment around it.
Okay, I can have a go at that.
Yeah.
So I think that this is still early days, and a lot of the machine learning and the artificial intelligence programming that needs to go into dynamic and reflective technologies that you would see on facade panels or even floor plates or internal wall systems is yet to be defined. But for sure, I think the optimism and the enthusiasm that people have across all the media labs and even architects who are beginning to introduce these systems within controlled and monitorable spaces is that they're trying to reduce, obviously, from different aspects. So they're trying to improve lifestyle by offering the same panel system to different user groups, by easily changing wall color or heat or cold, all of these kind of things. So there are different companies looking at this. I think it's right now a dark science in terms of how much of this is actually being made available to the public, but it'll definitely revolutionize, I think, advertising, because you can imagine full building facades being controlled using this technology. It'll revolutionize climatic and thermal comfort within buildings, because you can flip from being highly reflective to being translucent and allow heat to come in. So all of these things are being looked at as opportunities within this space. But I think the key thing, as we've been discussing earlier, is the person who controls the ability to code is ultimately going to define the kind of lifestyles and the performance benefits that we get out of this. And that's why, I mean, it's a growing field. I think there's not enough people who are as yet attuned with it, or those who are attuned with it don't understand necessarily all the learning that exists, the wealth of knowledge that exists across all the different contexts that we live in. So it'll be a while before we actually begin to see a universal solution that can progressively improve our lives.
Okay.
Well, also aesthetics is there of importance, and we're still very sensible to how things look, and like we have to have like a lot of glazing on our buildings. We have to have like a reflective coating somewhere. So and for instance, one of the most obvious things to do is making building mass accessible, just to damp the temperature in a room, or even implementing like phase change materials, which are kind of an adaptive system of creating virtual mass actually. Those technologies have been around quite a while, and they're not adapted.
With the current building modeling systems that we have today, we can actually put together so many different scenarios, okay, for the material usage, and changing those, putting different combinations together to study, okay, how these work together, to actually, at the end of the day, select the correct approach to go with, okay.
Well, I think study is the right word. Yeah. It's still what we need to do. It's a dark side. It's still research going on, and there's still a lot of research that should be done before we can actually say like, okay, this will be a stable solution where we have some return on investment, and where we get the effects we want, short term and also long term, because then we come to the other question about, well, actually all the scarce sources and
sustainability side.
Yeah, the other thing, again, having coming out this place for so long, it's always been the price is the most important thing in this region. It's not only this region. I was in the Far East, in China, and anywhere you go, price is always the most important thing to the client. And because of that, technology and things have been around for a long time. Precasting things, doing modules and things, it's been around for 30 years, but people don't do it because it costs more.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it the price or the economics of the option?
Economics in a way.
The economics of the option.
Yeah, because the price, they're looking for the lowest price, and that therefore it's difficult to use technologically advanced systems and things to do things. As a base cost, it's going to cost a lot of money. You haven't got mass scale. If you had mass scale, which is what economics is all about, and you built everything like that in Dubai, for example, then of course you got the benefits of it. But when you only do it occasionally on separate buildings, there's no price economics there.
Yeah.
Well, and in the end, it's also, we should see a building in operation is actually the one where users interact with the building. It's when we use energy and where we can, well, save energy, and making like use of the smart materials. It's yet to prove that it's solid technology.
When you're looking at a building or a development, you're talking about people that are looking for life support systems within these buildings. So interaction with the life support systems that are there will happen, okay? Now, how you take that interaction and translate it into trends, functions.
I think that is the idea. I think the artificial intelligence can actually get a little bit of, extract that information from such a big amount of data, and then maybe pre-cool the building a little bit later if the night before has been a big event, football match, cricket, or concert, for example. Something like that puts all these things together. I think that is where eventually we'll probably get and extract all that information. From all that massive amount of data that is generated, to extract those key elements and then provide good insights on how to operate the building and make the most of it.
Thank you. We have another question. Yes.
Hello? Yes. I had a question concerning how the construction industry is, we called it like a dinosaur. It's true somehow, but up to what extent the design consultants are actually directing the construction industry to provide better data during the construction and to maximize the asset and the efficiency of the assets for the operational side when it goes from the construction phase to the operational phase.
Okay. Well, I would go back to what I said at the beginning. Your aims and your smart buildings and everything are all very well, but when you build it using systems that are 30, 40 years out of date, I don't understand how you're ever going to arrive at that kind of a balance. To me, technology, or as you said, buildings one day will be built by machines anyway, and they will just be dropped into place. Although building complicated cities is not easy, just dropping bits into place. But again, it's a mentality thing, it's a mindset. It's too many people in this region and in Far East when I was there, and in Europe when I've been there. There's too many people still think they want to do it as cheap as possible because they're going to get the best price at the end of the day. They don't understand the benefits that are derived from doing things in a technically advanced way. They don't understand that because nobody really explains that to them. And I think this is the thing that holds it back in this region and everywhere I go. So.
Okay, gotcha.
I think, in my opinion, sometimes when you do the design of a building, you're based on codes, on technical codes, and that gives you a certain benchmark that you have to meet. And then the client tells you, well, let's do a little bit 10% better, and that is your design. But you do not know how the building is going to be operated, or if it's going to be a hotel or an office. You don't really know. And so I think something that kind of crosses the bridge between the design, the construction, and the operation is necessary. And not just crosses the bridge, but actually kind of closes the loop.
Exactly.
That is necessary. And we've mentioned BIM, and I think BIM could be a good tool to actually translate information from the design stages through the construction, actually, the operation, and then eventually back into the designers of not obviously of that building, but of future buildings, because you will know actually how what you designed, it was oversized 1.2 times. Or the other way around. So rather than kind of stick and comply with the sustainable code or the technical codes, you will be able to get insights of what is actually the building operating how.
Excellent. Gentlemen, due to the time constraints, we have to end the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.